Welcome to Unequally Yoked Us Now. I am Neil Winters,
I'm Naomi Winters.
and we are joined by.
This is Jen.
Hi.
Jen.
I'm not going to give myself a last name, so I'm not going to do my real last name or a fake one, but my name's Jen.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Today is mostly going to be a Naomi and Jen show. I am here for, comic relief or something. For my shirt to match the sunflowers on the flower stand. But other than that, I'm going to let you two go.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about sobriety and alcohol and how we came to be where we're at with our relationship with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Simple?
Simple.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
So Jen was kind enough to kind of make some notes of what we're gonna be talking about. So I'm gonna let you take the lead.
Sure. I think for everybody, why don't we just start with our childhood experiences or perspectives on alcohol? And for the background, for anybody that's new to this podcast, Naomi was raised in a LDS tradition. So, and I was born and raised in a Christian home with a dad as a pastor. So we do have that religious context which definitely can impact your decisions or your exposure to alcohol as a child. Do you want to start, Naomi? What was your early what was your childhood perspective like about alcohol?
So in the religion I was raised in, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't have coffee or tea even. These things were taught in something called the Word of Wisdom, which was believed to be inspiration from an authority in the church, a prophet, and he let us know what was healthy. But one of those teachings was alcohol was not good for the body. And I did grow up, even though I was in Utah and there wasn't a lot of drinking around me. I did grow up with my family on the other side being drinkers. So my parents would call it a disease, but it was always with the intent that there was some sort of choice. That, that you, when you had too much alcohol, and I don't know that they taught me this. I just learned from an early age that was kind of a character flaw.
Well,
okay.
It's a moral issue, really. So, I mean, we'd be around family and there are definitely some alcoholic tendencies and behaviors there. I knew that it was in my genetic makeup to be predispositioned to have issues with alcohol. So I was forewarned and warned several times not to mess with it. You just don't take your chances.
Did you was your family kind of obeying the Word of Wisdom on both sides of your family? Like how did was there kind of a no alcohol type of atmosphere, generally speaking, on both sides of your family?
Well, her dad is a convert, so her dad her dad's family they didn't believe in the Word of Wisdom.
Okay. So
everyone around me, and they were in a different state. So everyone where I was didn't drink. Everywhere that we'd go visit family in the other state, we were around drinking. And we had one in particular that was on and off the streets, homeless from gambling, from all sorts of addiction type behaviors. And I hate to call it a behavior because we're going to get in a little bit to what it does to your brain, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was very jaded, like, okay, it's a disease, but not really.
Right.
Like you have choice, you have the option, it's
funny when it has it's almost like a conflicting thing of it's a disease and it's a behavior. So it's not your fault, but it also is. It's a weird conflicting message that you grew up hearing, maybe.
Yeah, it was very confusing.
Yeah, totally.
For
me, oh, sorry. I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, that's fine. Let's get into that. Yeah, tell me more about you.
So on my mom's side of the family, had an atmosphere where her parents always drank like on the weekends, had friends over, they had poker parties, like it was their house was like the fun house, drinking and partying on the weekends. But then during the week they both had full-time jobs, and so they made alcohol in their family sort of, it was binging and then behaving. So that's kind of how she grew up with, is like, yeah, alcohol is crazy, but then you just go back to being good, and then you just go to your job. So she grew up seeing that her whole life.
Yeah.
And then my mom married my dad, who grew up in a real strong Christian home, and they just never had alcohol in the home. Like it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't really like a positive negative. It just wasn't around. So when my mom and dad got married, they just never had alcohol in the house, because my mom grew up thinking her family had a problem with alcohol that was negative. My dad just never had any experience. So for that reason, they just didn't even bother to have it in their home. And it was never really talked about as a good or a bad. It just was a non-issue. It just wasn't there. I think they just had two different views. And when my mom and dad came together, they just, there was never a stitch of alcohol in my home when I was growing up. Never.
So from a young age, I was very much taught not to mess with pain medicine.
Right. So you knew there was some kind of thing with substances that you could get in trouble with, because there's a family history of getting into trouble with substances. Yeah, and whether it was food or substances, because for my mom, it was food. When she was young, she was actually quite overweight when she was young, because she never got into alcohol, but she ate a lot, and she was very obese when she was a child. She lost all of that in high school and never was overweight again. But I think that mindset of the using any kind of substance to calm down emotions stuck with her for a long time. So she was afraid of substances, that because of her relationship with food being unhealthy and causing physical harm to her, I think that made her afraid of any other substance, that she would go down some kind of an addictive pathway. But for her, it was food and not substances. I watched that video last night when you guys were watching it. I watched the whole thing as well, made a bunch of notes. It was so interesting. And I think the neurotransmitters and the chemicals and what happens in your brain was fascinating. And it's so true. Like I've learned that several times before, but it was nice to hear her make it very understandable. And I think it makes so much sense when you think about whether it's food, substances, any kind of control mechanism that you're doing to manage emotions. Yeah. You're processing trauma or negative emotions through something outside of yourself that makes it shut the hell up. Whatever that is. It's like a control thing.
Yeah.
It's a dopamine hit. Yeah.
One of the things she talked about was what was it? Labor is her last name. I don't remember her first.
Linda?
Nicole.
No.
Nicole Labor.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see how much we depend on the dopamine hit that we don't even realize, and how that substance just overtakes that, especially for those who are addicts.
It hijacks the brain.
The neuroscience she talked about is very well documented. Like showing the changes, it biologically makes changes in your brain, so that when you become like addicted to a substance, the amount that you need increases in order to cause the exact same changes that used to occur with a lower amount. And you can see it measured in the brain. And I loved her example about if you were, dying of thirst and somebody offered you water at the cost of your children's lives, and that how you would biologically not be able to resist. And then once you'd satiated the thirst, you would regret and try to barter and make like, how do I reverse that decision? And I thought that was very interesting from a like biochemical standpoint of how badly your brain cannot not do it. When you're when you're in active addiction, you cannot not do it. And it's no longer a choice. And that was so fascinating to see it from the brain science. I liked that. I thought that was really neat.
Again, Nicole Labor Addiction 101. Yeah,
it was a really good video. I liked it a lot. It was great.
Yeah, that was a crazy thing, because the whole if you are without water for 5 days and someone comes up will you give up your family for water? And I'd like to think, yeah, I would
You just
I
die
would be
and sacrifice
strong.
yourself. And it's
Yeah, but
interesting because you do think, like, when you are not struggling with active addiction, like you're not actively addicted to a substance, you could say no. Like you could be like, no, I'll self-sacrifice, like I'm going to whatever. But when your brain chemicals have been hijacked, you don't have that ability anymore. I thought that was very fascinating because I think that makes a lot more sense of why once you have a period of sobriety, and you've developed coping mechanisms and you've developed resilience and you've gotten good quality treatment, whatever that looks like for you, then that exact same scenario presented to you is not even a difficult choice. It's like, nope, you can actually choose the other. But when you're in active addiction, you can't. So I don't know. I found that really interesting. I hope
the
that
other
makes
piece
sense.
the other piece that was that going along with what you said, Jen, is that you retrain your brain when you're coming off the
Yeah.
addiction. She talked about how prisoners or incarcerated people can be incarcerated for 5 years
Hmm.
and become dry during that time, but they don't do the work
Yeah.
to practice healthy coping mechanisms. And so therefore they haven't burnt
Yeah.
those neural pathways into their brains. They get released and they go right back to the substance.
So do you
Totally.
remember I used the term lizard brain?
Yeah.
She calls that the midbrain in her
Yep.
talk to simplify things. And then
Yeah.
we have the frontal cortex, which is involved in reasoning, executive decision making, your morals, your values.
Right.
But just being able to logically make a choice that is in check with your moral
Hmm.
compass, I guess.
Hmm.
Is there anything you might add to that? What I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I made a couple notes when she was talking. One of the things I liked that she talked about with that was about mice. Oh, darn. It was such
Yeah,
a
they
funny
don't have
quote. Oh, she said
they
mice get
don't have
addicted to drugs, but they don't even come from bad homes.
Yeah.
She was like, mice don't come from bad homes. They don't even have a frontal cortex. So it's not necessarily a matter of morals or ethics or values because these poor little mice get addicted as well because it's an addictive chemical. And I
Yeah.
liked that a lot. I thought that was interesting because I was like, oh yeah, like of course you're going to get addicted to an addicted substance, you dummy. Like why would you think you're immune to that? And she said like only 1 in 4 people labeled with addiction or diagnosed have had trauma that contributed to it. So that's one piece,
significant, like serious trauma.
huge. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that 3 out of 4 become addicted because they are taking an addictive substance that is changing the wiring of their brain, even if it wasn't rooted in trauma to start with.
Yep.
For those of us who it is rooted in trauma, like I think that probably applies to you and me, Naomi, that some of our use of alcohol in a very unhealthy way was started by trauma or escaping emotions and deep feelings. And so we tend to think, okay, the reason I did this is it started as magical medicine and turned into misery. And then you're like, oh shit, now what do I do? It was working so good for a while. But it's neat. Like I thought that was really important for her to say there 3 out of 4 people become addicted, not because they were escaping trauma, but because your brain gets addicted to addictive substances.
Now,
right?
what about remember how she said there are people that will drink and drink and drink and then they decide to stop and they never
Mhm.
pick up again.
Yeah.
And
Spontaneous sobriety.
she claims they are not truly they do not have the substance use disorder. They're not addicted.
Yeah.
Like someone that is suffering with addiction.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that sat with you and what that did that resonate?
Yeah, it did. That was interesting. I think there's a lot of science and research that still needs to be done, but I absolutely hear what she's saying. One of the people that inspired me a lot was a comedian named Jessa Reed. She years ago, many years ago, she gave this she used to do a podcast called Mormon and the Meth Head. And so it was her and an ex-Mormon missionary, and she used to be a meth head. Like she was a methamphetamine addict, lived on the street, no teeth. Like, she was homeless for a long, long time. She did so many crazy things. And her dad had tried to intervene, tried to put her in rehab, all these things when she was a street living meth addict. And he tried for quite a long time to help her get sober. And then he just quit trying and let her, run its course. And one day she was on the phone with him and he just said, Jessa, when you're tired of this life and like when you're done, you let me know and I'll come pick you up. And I was like, that's wild. But that's what he did. And she said literally 6 months later, she was like, I'm so tired of this. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. And she was a meth addict. And he picked her up, took her home to wherever they were from. And she just stopped doing drugs. Like, she had spontaneous remission. And I learned that story many years ago. And I thought, that's wild. Like, do people just stop doing it? So
Sometimes.
the way that yeah. And for me, the way that it resonated with me, because you and I have had these chats privately once in a while.
Mhm.
For me, when I learned a lot about the science, and I've talked before, but I did find a lot of help with Annie Grace and her philosophy. And there's also another girl that does a podcast called Sober Powered. And she's actually a neuroscientist and she explains the neuroscience of addiction. Learning those things helped me reset my brain or something. And genuinely, I feel like it was like a spontaneous sobriety, but that doesn't also seem fair because it was a lot of work.
Right.
So I feel like when you say like, oh, they just stopped and never did it again, it's like, it just sounds like it was easy, but it wasn't. But
and she does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One interesting thing I
Okay.
wanted to bring up, I've been reading the Annie Grace book, This Naked Mind.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
about 3/4 of the way through it.
Mhm.
One of the stories when Naomi asked you about the whole spontaneous recovery thing, because one of the big examples that Annie uses is that of her father, who
Oh, yeah.
decided to
Right.
quit drinking and just made a decision, which
Yeah.
which gets into the question of willpower versus work. Because
That's a great topic because honestly, the willpower part, when you need to use willpower to stop drinking, that's when it's hard and awful and it fucking sucks. The reason why you are able, or I am able to have like what looks like spontaneous recovery or just sobriety, whatever, is like I don't actually have to use willpower at all. I haven't wanted anything to drink for a long, long time. There's no temptation, there's no desire. So I'm not fighting it in any way. Like, there's no temptation. So right now, being sober is like the easiest thing ever because I don't care. And I also have no triggers whatsoever. So I find like the willpower piece is a huge question. Like, what is
you're
that
not
about?
white. Neither you nor Naomi are white knuckling it right
No,
now, I guess.
not at
We
all.
don't have. At least I don't.
But I have in the past.
desire. Yeah.
Right.
I have in the past, and it was hard at
Yeah.
first.
Totally. Agreed.
Yeah, and there's science to that with the brain also and the chemicals.
And I was like, oh, even my first experience sober on an outing as a family, we went sledding, like skidooing in the mountains. And it was like very adventurous to say the least. Like, it was wild. And I found for the first time in quite a few years that I felt a sense of nervousness that wasn't anxiety. And it was so weird because I was like, oh, I feel nervous about what I'm about to do, but I don't feel panic and terror and fear. I just feel like normal, healthy, yeah, this is a scary thing to do. I'm going to go down a really steep cliff into in the mountains. Like, it was a scary thing to do, but I was like, oh, I just feel like a normal, healthy amount of nervousness. And it was,
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense, but it was like the weirdest thing to feel nervous and not dread and fear and panic.
Right. And neurobiologically, that is your dopamine receptors, like that threshold is resetting.
Yes.
Before to feel okay, you had to have dopamine levels up to here.
Right.
And then as it
Yes.
resets,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more normal. If
Totally. Yeah.
if you have the post-traumatic growth
Mhm.
after the
Yes.
addiction,
Yeah,
meaning you
because
have to
just
be able
yeah,
to change yourself and work on
totally.
being a functioning person in society again.
Yeah, absolutely. Like doing the work is what's important, because even in that Nicole Labor's talk, she talked about how if you just put somebody in a prison cell and they cannot use a substance, they can go 2 years in that prison cell and you let them out and they'll just go right back to it because they've done none of the work. But if you do remove the substance and work on resilience and coping skills and all that stuff, they can like have brain recovery in as little as 90 days. And
Mhm.
so I find that part of it just so interesting, of like, how fast can we get the relief? Because then it's really worth it to do that hard work so that
Well,
you're
and
not
that's
struggling, recovering and recovering and recovering and recovering
Mhm.
for 20 years. Like, oh my gosh, can I
Right,
just finish the work, please? And then enjoy where the balance part is and not
right.
have my brain rebound. I don't know.
that
So the words that she uses is you can be without alcohol, but if you haven't done the work, you're going to be restless, irritable, and discontent.
A
That is
100%.
from yeah, I mean that is
A
from
100%.
some sober type books and education they use
Yeah.
those words,
Yeah,
but
that's true. That's a very true fact. If you don't do the work, you're just gonna be mad. Like I actually talked about that when you and I filmed one of the other episodes, and I mentioned how when I was struggling with addictive drinking behavior, if I was being sober for a period of time, I was just kind of pissed off and resentful about it. Because I wasn't actually wanting to not drink. I was just like, well, I guess I shouldn't drink because I'm drinking in a bad way. But I was still irritable and whatever those words were. Like, yeah. But once I did the work on how, like, why was I doing that? How do I fix that? How do I make my brain recover and all of that? Then I can be sober and happy about it. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to drink. Like, I have no interest in that now,
right. Now
because I don't miss it. I don't crave it now. But if you're always like what some people will label like a dry drunk or whatever,
Mhm.
willpower.
then it's because you're mad that you're having to use willpower to not do something that you feel jealous of other people doing in what you perceive as a normal behavior with drinking. So you're jealous and resentful and annoyed about it.
Yeah, which is I felt for a long time in recovery just like all it did was make me want to drink.
Totally. That makes sense.
You know? And it's
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
didn't have a desire to stop. I wasn't
Right.
doing the work to
You felt
change,
forced into it. Yeah. And that's the
rebuild.
hard thing.
So there is some evidence, which is very strange, that they're finding that you can recover if you don't want to at first. You don't have to be willing. I mean,
Mm,
eventually in treatment, you can get there because the substance is taken out of your
yeah. Sure.
but yeah, that I found that
Yeah.
really interesting. It was
Hmm.
counterintuitive to me. But yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
That makes
one of the
that makes
questions.
sense.
One of the questions I when Naomi was at Fellowship Hall, they had the family get together where I was
Hmm.
there for a week, and we went over all the disease of addiction. And one of the questions I asked the therapist there was, do you have to be at rock bottom before you actually commit to changing? And
Hmm.
the answer is, like Naomi said, surprisingly, no. A
Yeah.
lot of
Right.
people do reach that rock bottom, but it's not always the case.
Totally. Yeah. So
So
you can just, yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And everybody's rock bottom looking at completely different. Like, yeah. Yeah. You don't
Yeah,
have to have something in the gutter with a brown paper bag. Like, you can just be like, this is making me slower at whatever. This is making my cardio suck. I don't like my sleep. I hate my skin. Like, I don't like the impact it's having. And now I need to get rid of this. That
is that where
can
you
be
were?
what you decide.
Is that
Yeah.
where you were, Jen? Would you call yourself having been at rock bottom, or at a point where you're just
No.
like, I just can't, this is not the way I wanna live my life?
I think if you were to label rock bottom moments, I can identify a bunch of places that I would have said, why did I not stop drinking after that happened? Or why did I not stop drinking when I did that? Like, that's horrifying and embarrassing or whatever. And none of those things made me stop. When I stopped, I actually was moderating just fine. Like, I had been drinking in what would look like a healthy way for a while before I was like, you know what, I just am sick of this. I felt like Jessa Reed, where I was like, I am sick of drinking. I'm done with this.
I can't relate.
I
Like I
know. And that's
can
good though.
and I
Everybody's
can't.
different.
I the second I got the taste of alcohol, I was obsessed. It was an
What was
obsession.
your first, can you explain what your first drinking experience was? We were going to get to that after talking about childhood experiences, but
Sorry.
what was your,
Yeah.
no, that's okay. What was your first experience with drinking and how did that change over time? How rapidly did it change? Like how did it start for you?
Yeah. So I was at a fancy event with with Neil, and we were they had alcohol, and hardly anyone was drinking. Nobody was at our table.
It was in
because-
Utah.
Yeah. But yeah, they brought white wine, and it just kind of was like, I want to taste that. So,
And this was before
I did.
this was while I was still at that accounting firm. So I hadn't even left the church yet. I hadn't even thought about leaving the church yet.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what came over me. I was just like, I want to try it. And I
Mhm.
tasted like just a tiny bit, not even a swallow. And I was okay with that. I didn't like, I was just like, oh, that tastes bad. It wasn't a big deal. It was like what you'd get in real vanilla, which
Mhm.
if you didn't know, vanilla has alcohol, a high content. But yeah, but when I drank enough to feel it, and I felt normal,
Mm.
which is different for someone that has an addiction. They frequently will feel energized instead of depressed. At least at one point, they will. They rarely get sick, have hangovers. I hardly ever had a hangover. And the first night that I decided I was going to actually try it and see what it felt like, I got drunk off 3 drinks and convinced myself I didn't like it. And then for the next year, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it was like,
Really?
yeah.
Interesting.
So
It like
I worked
woke up
with
something in you.
I worked with my
Mhm.
bishop because I
Mm.
wanted to go to the temple. Cannot
Mhm.
hold a temple recommend if you're breaking the word of wisdom actively. So I was able to do that, but with a lot of work and white knuckling. It was
Yeah.
pure
Wow.
willpower with that.
So what did alcohol give you? Like when you said the first time you had a couple of drinks, it made you feel normal. Did you mean that the alcohol like calmed you down enough that you could be present? Like you liked, like it made you feel normal. The alcohol made you feel normal? Is that what you
I
meant?
remember at first not liking that I felt out of control.
Okay.
But then I couldn't, once I got a taste of that I didn't care so much, I was chasing it.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
you know, my mother said I was the most obsessive type nurser from the very beginning, that I was hedonistic. And I had been using food. Oh my goodness, I'm having like my face is turning pink.
Is it?
It is. That's weird. But I just felt like comfortable.
Yeah, like it was sort of giving you comfort in some way
And
that
I
you
think
just
the
couldn't
only
get
time
elsewhere.
that I have felt completely at peace and comfortable in my skin is when I'm using a substance,
It
Yeah.
was
including drinking, including eating too much or too little,
Mhm.
any behavior.
It was interesting whenever we'd
Yeah.
go out to eat dinner when she was in the throes of her alcoholism, or we'd go to a restaurant, she would notice all the drinks, all the advertisements for alcohol all around us. Like she would point it out, and my thought process was, what in the heck is she looking at? I didn't even
Mhm.
think about it. I never noticed it, but she was unbelievably obsessed with alcohol.
So aware, so,
Yeah.
like could not notice.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
it was very abnormal. It was not a
Yeah.
normal drinker type behavior.
Well,
or
and I think that goes to those neurochemicals that Nicole had talked about. And she said that glutamate activates your memory association and your drug seeking triggers. Because remember, she was talking about like when you, like somebody that was addicted to, say, like Percocet, orange bottles are good. You remember how she like talked
And
about
the
like how that
pharmacist
association?
and
Oh, and pharmacists. So pharmacists that wear white coats. Oh, I love white coats. White coats are good. You know what's really good? The corner of 3rd Avenue and 25th Street. That's a great street. And it was like all these random associations, but they were all triggered by like that glutamate. So I wonder if your neurochemicals, even that early, were starting to adjust in your brain so that you were noticing all the alcohol triggers. Whereas since Neil didn't have that alcohol addiction process in his brain, he was like, what are you looking at? Like
Yeah.
you were seeing things because your brain was already readjusting its wiring.
Yeah. And I have watched people go from being a heavy drinker and then crossing that line to where the loss of control has started happening because of the neuro chemistry that's happening, all those hormones and things that are going on in your brain. It just becomes to a point. So there
Okay.
is a study done with the mice that we were talking about earlier, but the setup was that they could administer a substance, and even without a frontal cortex, getting that dopamine hit and it registering as life-saving in the lizard brain, because I did have quite a bit of trauma and stress. So I was definitely from an early age having that same reaction with stress and anxiety. Which she talks about the correlation of how close those are in the way that they behave. However, back to the study.
Yeah.
The mice would push that button at the expense of water, at the expense of food, or
their kids,
mix, like
at the expense of their lives.
socializing, everything, until they died. And I remember there being a time where it dawned on me I was going to lose my family. I was going to lose everything. And I would eventually, the only option how this would end would be me in the street, homeless, begging for money enough to get alcohol so that I wouldn't die from just withdrawal.
Yeah.
Because you can. I mean, you have seizures, you have.
Absolutely.
It happens all the time. There are several people in the program I know that a lot of funerals in that scene.
Yeah. Brutal.
A lot of relapse, because once there's one substance and you're getting that dopamine hit, the threshold, if it's not lowered through, retraining and healing and all the hard work, another substance will pop up to try to feel okay and normal. Like,
I think that's a good point, because when you think about like for yourself, you did mention that like you had some eating issues initially and then you had some alcohol issues, whatever, but the root of it is like that different substance filling the same thing before you started doing the work part. There's certain like something's going wrong again in the brain chemistry that's leading to that stuff, right?
That's true. I'm the drowning, not the drowning, the person that's without the water that would sacrifice.
One thing that you said just reminded me of myself, because I'm my own favorite subject. I wish I felt about alcohol the way I do about cigars. Like a cigar, I'll smoke a cigar maybe once every 2 or 3 months, and it's enjoyable for the time, but it's not enjoyable enough to make me want to do it often.
Yes. There you go.
It smells
Neat.
awful. I enjoy the rush, but but I enjoy it enough that I want to do it, rarely. I wish I felt the same way about alcohol, where I could be like, I enjoy what it makes me feel like, but not so much that I want to continue. I want to do it all the time, but I do do alcohol all the time. So I I don't know if that's a flaw in myself or not, but I wish I could have that same relationship with alcohols that I do with cigars.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful anecdote about is one addiction necessarily mean you are predisposed in the same way to all other substances? Because I think we all have our thing that is a way higher trigger than others, right? Even though it's an addictive substance. Like I can think of a lot of addictive substances that would probably be fun, and I wouldn't have a desire to continue to do them regularly.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I
I
don't
would
know.
postulate if the switch has been flipped,
There you
if
go. Sure.
if true like addiction cycle has happened and um and resetting of that threshold with the dopamine,
Mhm.
the crossover has gotten to the point where it's different.
Yeah, that
Like,
could be true. Yeah, that could be true as well.
I like personally listening to Neil's experience and some of the
Mhm.
other people in my life, I can
Yeah,
see that their experience and cycle with their substance, their drug of choice, was very different than mine, and it
Mhm.
seems not like the kind of alcoholic that I was. Like, there's
Mm.
flavors, like different, details to the story, but, like, a
Yeah,
true substance use disorder will have certain things that are recognizable, and they do have standards to diagnose whether or
for
not
sure.
that's
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Like the whole substance use disorder is a diagnostic framework from the DSM,
Mhm.
and it evaluates your drinking behaviors and your drinking associations and emotions and things around drinking or whatever substance that has occurred in the last year. So there is a diagnostic process and it's different for each person. Um,
Yeah. For me, as
Really
far as
interesting.
cross addiction, um, definitely at first didn't start with wanting to regulate emotions or feel normal. Um, it was to get out of pain
Hmm.
and um,
Yeah.
and it just seemed like medicine.
Hmm.
And the more I went on, the more I started seeing my brain go through the cycle again
Yeah.
and starting to get switched back into that mode, in which case I'm now at higher risk of going back to my drug of choice, my DOC, um, which I'm terrified I'll find out in my lifetime that my drug of choice is different than alcohol and that something may be introduced to me um, that is far worse for me.
Mhm.
And I do live with that fear. I do.
Mm.
So I have a couple questions
Yeah.
in follow up to that then.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say right now are some like sobriety goals that you currently are actively working on to prevent you falling down that path? Like, are there certain things that you're learning in your own sobriety program or just personally? Just things that, like, what are things that you're working on to help you prevent going down a shitty spiral again
Right.
in whatever area?
So right now with my sponsor, after listening to all the things I was doing to try to feel good and grow, she
Hmm.
said, "We got to get you working smarter, not harder. Like, this is so much time that you're spending on this, and it doesn't need to be that way." So I've
Mm.
streamlined what I do into really trying to change my my thought process, I guess. So things like the set prayers, or they call them prayers, but it really is priority setting. It's really
Hmm.
goal setting
Hmm.
in the words of a prayer, which I
Okay.
find comforting. That's what I'm used to. So
Yeah.
I don't. I think all the programs have a lot of similar concepts and basic ones that work. Um, for me, it's my higher power that I have to connect with. And that higher power is intellectually different for me and logically different for me than
Hmm.
my faith or hope or spirituality chooses to win out. I do make that choice to try to focus on one other than the other.
On your intellectual definition of higher
I
power.
go for the spiritual.
Oh, you go for the
I
spiritual
go for the
definition.
spiritual. I go for belief in a higher power because it I find it comforting. And I found it interesting. I have to connect with that I'm changing my motivation in life. I'm looking outside myself more. I'm looking to be an effective member of society where I'm productive and I'm reaching out and connecting with others because it has been mentioned several times when it comes to substance use disorder that the opposite of addiction is connection. And they were shocked by that. And there's a study, again with mice, where they make like
There's rats.
a
Rats.
ratopia. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Were
So the
they? Oh, go
ratopia,
ahead.
they set up all sorts of fun things. They had friends, they had lots to do that were exciting. And most of them were able to not, like, they no longer pressed the button for the substance because there was other interesting things to do. So
Yeah.
back in the time of, I believe it was the which war was it that they treated them with cocaine,
Heroin.
was it heroin for
Yeah.
treatment?
Yeah.
And a lot of them, when they came home, didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm
Very
trying to connect
interesting.
more. I'm
Yeah.
trying, and
Yeah.
that's where like the fellowship of any program is helpful.
Totally. Absolutely.
Being around other people who get it and have
Yeah.
changed their life and found things that work. But
Yeah.
going back to the question of what I do, it is a lot of goal setting, meditation. I think I take time to reflect on the motivation of my actions and choices and make goals of how I would like to proceed forward in
Yeah.
all of those. And things like, I mean, they call them character defects, which is simply qualities that are no longer serving me. Meaning those behaviors like being dishonest, that would be a character defect, right? If you're dishonest with yourself, you can't face a problem. You're not identifying it correctly. You're not admitting that it's there. So how do you come up with a solution if it's not a problem yet? So I don't know, Jen, I want to go back to your experience with feeling addicted. Do you feel addicted, or did you at one point feel addicted to alcohol? And what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's hard for me to it's hard to remember how I felt because it feels so distant, but there were times where I just felt unable to cope with the anxiety and the underlying panicky dread feeling that I was having. Because really at that time in my life, I was living in a state of constant PTSD. And I was mad at that label because when it's PTSD means post traumatic stress disorder, but there was no post about it. It was just traumatic stress, traumatic stress, traumatic stress. Like it was never in the past, it was in the present all of the time. And so the only thing that made that calm down was escaping from that panic feeling. So I don't know. I personally do not identify in any way with the label of addiction or addict or any of those things. I don't identify with any of the labels, but I know what it feels like to feel a compulsion to shut my brain off 100%. And it felt like a compulsion.
That
And
would be the
yeah,
assessment, looking from as an
yeah,
outsider in at you.
sure.
I can totally see that. I think
Yeah,
you're on. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, sorry, I forget what the rest, but that I forget what the rest of your question was, but that's how it felt to me. It was a compulsion to shut off the anxiety and the trauma that I could not get away from at that time.
Right.
And
Talk
yeah,
about that trauma I know you're probably very versed in the process of that lizard brain believing that it's a life or death situation when
Mhm.
you're in trauma rather
Yeah.
than just a regular stressor or
Oh, yeah.
worry, nervousness,
Mhm.
like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
What was
well, I mean, at that time when I was struggling a lot, and it wasn't, I don't know, at that time when I was struggling a lot, I was having so many overreactions to everything because my body was always in a state of such high anxiety that a door slamming would make me like flinch and like have a nervous system reaction that was way out of proportion with what was actually occurring because we had had so much trauma, and without disclosing what that trauma was around for the privacy reasons of my family and whatever,
Right.
right?
I just want to be careful about that. But the trauma was very real and very physical and very scary. And so my nervous system reaction to everything was so severe that I couldn't tolerate it. Like I
Mhm.
just wanted it to shut off. So I don't
I
know,
can
that's the way my
relate to
brain
that.
wiring.
I can
Yeah.
relate to that. Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
were, I mean, like you said, not. I will just make an overarching statement. You were going through some serious shit, as Doc Brown on Back to the Future would say.
It was heavy.
100%. We were going through some serious, serious shit in our family life for about 10 years. And out of the 10 years, I would say that for about 3 years, my method of coping with it with alcohol was definitely not okay. And it wasn't a continuous 3 years, but I think if you add that up, there was 3 years where alcohol was what I was using to help me calm my nervous system down. And that is a very, very substance use disorder way of coping with life.
So the
And
study,
yeah,
go on. I don't mean to
no,
interrupt.
it's okay. No, no, go ahead, please.
The study talked about 1 in 4 will have trauma. Of
Hmm.
Nicole said that.
Nicole said that. Yeah,
Our
Right.
best friend Nicole.
Yeah.
just fresh on my mind because that's what I listened to last. But
For
The
me, it
one in
was trauma. Like I was the 1 in 4
so
for sure. Oh yeah.
so
Because for me, like early drinking behavior for me, when I married into my husband's family, they had a pretty healthy relationship with alcohol as far as I've ever witnessed, like a family dinner, then you'd have a glass of wine, you'd have a couple drinks. Maybe a couple times in the summer, people would drink too much at a, outdoor backyard party with a fire pit, and it was funny and amusing, and then everything went back to normal. Like it never seemed out of control or scary. It was just nice and what looked normal. And that was interesting to me because I didn't grow up with alcohol being around. And so when we were newly married, like I would have a glass of wine here and there just so that I was like, I felt like I wasn't even a grown up if I was having a glass of water and everybody else was having a glass of wine. I was like, I'm such a dork. And also I am quite a bit younger than I'm younger than my husband and his sister. So I was the youngest joining in the family. So I felt like a kid sometimes. So sometimes that glass of wine made me feel like I'm finally sitting at the adult table, right? But it
mhm.
never, ever was a problem for me at all until the drinking was paired with trauma. Like I drank in a very healthy, normal way and never too much and never whatever for 15 years. I would just have a glass of wine here and there. I'd have a couple at this time and then I wouldn't drink for a couple months. Like I never had a problem with alcohol at all. For at least 15 years, I drank in a very healthy, normal way that, in my opinion, until it was paired with trauma and I realized what an escape I could get from it. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I kind of think about the whole mummy wine culture where moms will be like, after a hard day with their kids, like, oh, I deserve a glass of wine. As soon as my brain paired alcohol with deserving it and relief and medicine and this calms my brain down, as soon as it paired with needing to escape, that's when it became a trigger for problem. Before that trigger was there, it wasn't actually a problem for a very long time. So that's why I think that's like for me, I fit into that 1 in 4 because the only reason my brain became addicted is because it solved a problem for me. Alcohol solved a problem for me, and it worked really well for a long time
Mm-hmm.
Until it didn't.
until it didn't. And I was like, oh, fuck, now I need to get rid of that and figure out something else to do and figure out how do I no longer need it and do the recovery work in my brain and get into that, all the different things that I did in order to get rid of alcohol. But I actually didn't need to get rid of alcohol till I used it because I was trying to calm down trauma, honestly.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is in one of my treatment centers, they did an activity and it was all women. They would read a statement. And if it was true for us, we would step
Mhm.
into the circle. And if it wasn't, we'd stay outside the circle.
And do the hokey
Right.
pokey.
Yes.
Yes.
And the amount of trauma in that room was way more than 1 in 4.
I know. I thought that was a low number too. I'm
I
with you
think
on that,
it's
Naomi.
not an accurate representation because it was
I don't
a
either.
ridiculous amount of trauma that was happening.
Yeah.
Everyone was in the middle at some point.
Yeah. My gut instinct is that it's far worse because
Yeah.
how is it possible that the exact same, I don't know, the exact same drinking behaviors for so many years never tipped into any problematic anything until trauma was added to the picture for me.
Mm. Yep.
And also now that that trauma is no longer happening and paired with a good chunk of period away from alcohol, I have no temptation. The trauma's not there. I genuinely do not think having a glass of wine would put me back in that place again. I really don't. And I know myself and I know I can be trusted with me. And I know that that's true. Like but I also don't want it. So I don't care. But how could you go through a period of your brain being so addicted to being no longer addicted and fine if it's not so deeply entwined and linked to trauma? I don't know. There's something there, is all I'm saying. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not an addiction specialist. I just know what's true for my own self.
Yeah, I think the science is there. There was one part that stuck out to me. I took a little picture of it, the midbrain hijacking the abilities of the frontal cortex. So that midbrain is the one that is involved in trauma and feeling life or death. And so the brain, when you are starting to, why someone that has struggled with an addiction or a substance use disorder would be at higher risk of relapsing if they ignite the same process with another substance, which I'm seeing in my life, but didn't at first. I wasn't trying to control any sort of emotion or feel normal, except for the pain. So one of the reasons why people may start again is pain. But they say to ask yourself, would it cause death? Because drinking for me would. And once it's once it's been activated, I am done. Like it's over. Like for me. And that's not true for everyone.
Important to, and that is so important and wise for every person to know for themselves. Like you have to trust yourself about that.
Yeah.
Why would you risk that? That's silly. Who are you proving anything to risk it? That would be silly.
Right. Another one,
agreed.
You mentioned the anxiety. Stress is another one. Again, will it cause death? But the substance would for me.
Yeah.
But I would still choose it, just like the rats, just like the mice. I would have chosen to die for my substance. And by choosing, I mean, I'm that person in the desert wanting the water over anything. Like that's all that mattered. The other thing they mentioned was specific people or events, something that sets it off. But like when you ask someone who relapses, it's usually because something difficult has popped up that they're facing.
Yeah, that's true.
And they go back to the same coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because that's what was comfortable and worked really well short term, but caused a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what is one of your favorite alcohol-free moments that you've had in sobriety since you quit drinking? Like, do you
Yeah.
have anything that stands out in your mind that you're like, "Oh, thank goodness I'm not drinking anymore. I would have missed this." Or something that just you're like,
I
"Oh, this."
remember one of the first things that happened to me. Oh, this is a little bit of a war story, but I am willing to share it. Not
Okay.
not proud of this.
Mhm.
Um, not in my character. My executive reason would come out winning if it was active, but I would put alcohol in like my Gatorade drink. So
Mhm.
couple 4 shots of vodka.
Mhm.
And that's what it would take for me to get through one of my kids' like performances or like those the ones that
The
last like
plays
3 hours and it's
are
everyone singing a million different songs. So I'm not proud of that,
it
but
was
I remember
torturous.
after I first got
Yeah.
sober, I remember sitting
Yeah.
there and I enjoyed it so much. I loved all of it.
Wow.
I loved the kids that I didn't know. I wanted it to keep going.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, "How did I miss all this?" I was missing
Yeah.
the joy, and it's because everything
Aw.
was numb for so long,
Yeah.
the good
Yeah,
and the
that's
bad.
awesome.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
really liked that. How about you?
Yeah. For me, one of the ones that has stuck out in my brain so much is I heard Jamie Lee Curtis make a comment about her whole sobriety thing, and one of the things she said was, "Be where your feet are." And for
Mm,
some reason, that has stuck in my brain so much that it like makes me super emotional because I think when I was escaping all the time from anxiety, I was never present. Like I was always in the future tripping, or I was regretting the past, or thinking about what did I say? What did I do yesterday? Or what am I going to do tomorrow? Or like I was so obsessed with the future and the past that I was never present when I was struggling ever.
That is a
And so
great con
oh, so be where your feet are is something I say to myself several times a day. And like some of my favorite sober moments are just like running into a friend at the grocery store and having not even the slightest sense of needing to rush, but just being in the moment, being present, like actually listening, hearing what they have to say, asking follow-up questions and like completely losing track of time, or I better get home to put the ice cream in the freezer. Like my brain is not everywhere else, it's right here. So it's a bunch of little moments, but it's really being present there and be where my feet are that I've noticed I'm able to do now that I don't have a struggle with a substance.
yeah, and that's my goal now
Yeah.
is to use
Yeah.
my experience, strength, and hope to help others, and it
Yeah.
makes it
Awesome.
worthwhile. It means it was meaningful. I can make something
Hmm.
good out of it.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts, Jen?
Um, hmm. Well, one more question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you hope to see yourself, Naomi, in like 5 years? Like, where do you envision and hope that you'll be in about 5 years? Knowing all the stuff you've been through, where would you like to be?
Yeah. Um, right now I'm thinking a lot about my career. I've never gotten to make goals and work towards that, meaning my life script was always to be a stay-at-home mom and a
Hmm.
housewife. And that is what I have been doing. And I quite enjoyed it most of the
Hmm.
time until I did.
Yep.
And I would like to continue all the wonderful things and be present, watching my kids grow up, watching them have kids, watching them get married, all the things that are happening,
Yeah.
just how it progresses. And also, I would like to put some work into my career and maybe have some growth in that area as well. That's like my 5 year, this
Yeah.
is what I'm
Nice.
focusing on. I would like to get back into my music as well because she
Oh,
talks
cool.
about the loss of joy also that
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
with
Yes.
it is very real because your threshold for joy is so high because you've been abusing that dopamine receptor.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I lost my love of music for a long time, and
Mhm.
I'm just now starting to get back into it, but I still don't have the drive or um, the excitement.
Well,
How
for
about
me,
you,
I'm going to tell you mine. Yeah, I'll tell you mine. So I have a couple, but similarly, I think I lost a lot of my joy and my creativity. I used to write a lot when I was younger. I wrote all the time. I wrote poetry, I wrote prose, I wrote fiction, nonfiction, I wrote journals. I wrote all the time. So I would like to write a book before I turn 50, and I'm 47 right now. So I would like to write a book, some type of memoir of all the things that we have been through with everything, trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all going to be those overcoming stories. Some of it'll be how to take care of ducks or what I've learned in jujitsu or whatever. It's just going to be a memoir, but I'm going to write a book. Um, that's my primary one, is just getting back to writing, because that was my joy for a long time and I lost it for a long time. So that's my
Writing
priority.
is all right. So
Awesome.
anyway, I guess we should
Okay,
wrap this up.
sounds
Like
good.
and subscribe.
Oh yeah, like and subscribe, the usual. Let us know what you think about alcoholism and how it has or hasn't worked for you.
And any studies or something you might want to list in a comment that have helped you. Let's pass along
And
ideas.
and yeah, so thank you for joining us. I've been Neil Winters
Naomi Winters.
and Jen.
And I'm Jen from Canada.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great
Thanks, guys.
weekend. God bless. Cheerio. All the best, as they say in Ireland.
Stay curious.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Okay. Thank you.